Thank you very much for inviting me to come here to this event and to this beautiful state of Idaho. I have children that live here in Burley, and so it's a win-win for me. I get to visit them as well. My husband, Jeanette Finicum, was murdered by out-of-control agents who were trained and motivated by the manipulated definitions of extremist, white supremacist, and terrorist during an illegal roadblock known as a kill stop, January 26, 2016. He had gone to Oregon to stand peacefully for property rights, our federal constitution and our state constitutions. He went there to stand with and for those whom he considered to be his neighbors. In Oregon, it was Susie and Dwight Hammond. In Nevada, it was Carol and Cliven Bundy, and for you and for me. Upon impact, he left his truck alone, with his hands up in the air. He was surrounded by 30 plus highly trained and heavily armed officers. There were snipers in the trees. And with his empty hands in the air, he was shot 3 times in the back. As he bled out in the snow unprovoked, they opened fire upon the remaining passengers in the truck for over 10 minutes before they arrested them. No warrants, no due process, no trial by a jury, just murdered. During the Malheur demonstration, there were unbelievable actions taken by Governor Brown and by the Obama administration's FBI. They were in collusion with our politically aligned media to silence and kill their political opposition, including Jeanette Finicum. The freedom of the press is a cherished right, and we want to believe in a free and unbiased press. But today's media has lost all credibility and confidence of the American people, who see them as just fake news. The domestic safety, yes. The domestic safety and security of our nation has been entrusted to law enforcement, and we want to trust in their intention and integrity. But today's FBI has lost the trust of the American people. We have recently watched many of our elected officials abuse their power, manipulate their control of law enforcement, and neglect their sacred responsibility to protect individual life, liberty, and property of the American people by refusing to send in the law enforcement to protect them. We have watched during this COVID crisis these same elected officials abuse one of the just and holy principles underlying the Constitution of the United States, and that is of our religious liberties. Governor Brown is allowing political aligned violent protesters to burn down, loot, and destroy businesses and neighborhoods. She is allowing her political terrorist operatives to do harm to innocent American citizens, disrupt business, transportation, and commerce. Instead of allowing her law enforcement to help regain peace and stability in her city, she has ordered them to stand down, allowing the violence to continue. Governor Brown is now ordering the federal government to abandon the federal building it has been protecting for over 60 days and to leave her state. This irony is deafening. 4.5 years ago, Governor Brown was singing a different tune. She called in her cohorts, the press, to whip up the rhetoric and label lynch the peaceful demonstrators at Malheur in order to influence their readers to grab their pitchforks. Then she demanded the Obama administration's FBI come into her state in full force to end the peaceful protest at the Malheur Wildlife Refuge by any means necessary. Governor Brown was totally politically motivated then, as she is now. She wanted to stop the message of freedom, so she allowed over 400 highly trained FBI and HRT team members with their guns and equipment into her state to put an end to the First Amendment rights of the peaceful demonstrators at Malheur. Has any elected official or member of the press pointed out this travesty of justice? For 4 years now, I have traveled this country on behalf of the Finicum family, introducing to the American people who Jeanette Finicum really was. Let me tell you a little bit about Jeanette. Jeanette and I have 12 children and 34 grandchildren. Lavoie loved his God, his family, and his life. He loved to play, to tease, and to work hard. He spent years loving and teaching not only his own children, but many disadvantaged teenage boys in our home. He loved his neighbor, and he gave freely of his time and what he had. His dream to own his own ranch was realized. He loved ranching, and he loved his cows. He was strong and courageous. He was a man of strong character. He was principled and trustworthy. He was loving and kind. He was my true friend. He loved his freedom, his agency, given to him by God. He loved his children and grandchildren so much so that he was willing to stand for them. He loved living in America, and he knew that he was blessed to be here. He loved this country and stood for liberty for all. He said in an interview with Al Jazeera, "Freedom has no color. Freedom is colorblind." Our family has filed a wrongful death lawsuit against the federal government and the state of Oregon and a host of other individuals. We plan on fighting this with all we have. We want a jury trial. We want to see justice for Lavoie. We want to help preserve due process for every American. Our family would like to see reform and accountability in our police departments across this country. We need the bad cops fired. We need a national database to keep track of those bad cops so that they are not rehired somewhere else in this country. We need to have a commission in Washington to discuss this reform. Our family is for pro-responsible government and pro-responsible law enforcement. Moving forward, we also would like to see change in all those violation of civil rights and due process in reference to our ranching communities. So we want to offer practical ideas of reform and accountability regarding land use policies and collaborative partnerships between the Western ranching communities, local and state governments, and federal entities operating within the jurisdiction of these individual Western states. We advocate for accountability, reform, and less government intrusion into the lives of its citizens. Elder David Bednar, a member of the Quorum of the 12 Apostles of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, said in his 2020 BYU Law School address, quote, "COVID-19 has alerted us to the importance of defending the borders between personal liberty, constitutional rights, and governmental authority. It has alerted us to the many attacks on the freedoms of religion, speech, and assembly." He goes on to say, "The annual review is a time to reflect on religious freedom and its place in the law, the nation, and our personal lives. Doing so in the midst of COVID-19 sharpens our focus. This present crisis may be a moment when we too come to ourselves and realize, perhaps as never before, just how precious and fragile religious freedom is." Elder Benon went on to say, "Being in each other's presence is a unique and irreplaceable experience, just like now. In Christianity, the God of the Old Testament came to his people in the flesh. Jesus Christ touched people, embraced them, healed them, ministered to them, and we believe we are called to do as he did. He taught, 'Where 2 or 3 are gathered together in my name, there I am in the midst of them.' Gathering, in short, is at the core of faith and religion. Indeed, if the faithful are not gathering, sooner or later they will begin to scatter. And because gathering lies at the very heart of religion, the right to gather lies at the very heart of religious freedom. This time of restriction and confinement has confirmed for me that no freedom is more important than religious freedom. The freedom of religion properly has been called our first freedom. It is first not only because of its placement as the first right in the First Amendment, but also because of the paramount importance of respecting the moral agency of each person. Living even for a brief few weeks under the restrictions imposed on religious activity to people of faith, is a stark reminder that nothing is more precious to people of faith than the freedom to worship Almighty God according to the dictates of their own conscience and to openly and freely live according to our own convictions. Religious liberty is one of the just and holy principles underlining the Constitution of the United States. That liberty draws from and in turn reinforces the other rights protected by the First Amendment: the right to speak freely, to make use of the free press, to peacefully gather with others, and to petition a government for redress of grievances. Freedom of religion stands as a bulwark against unlimited government power. It safeguards the right to think for oneself, to believe what one feels to be true, and to exercise moral agency accordingly. It secures the space necessary to live with faith, integrity, and devotion. It nurtures strong families. It gives protection in our communities of faith and the rich and sacred relationships that they make possible. Nothing government does is more important than fostering the conditions wherein religion can flourish. While believers and their religious organizations must be good citizens in a time of crisis, never again can we allow government officials to treat the exercise of religion as simply non-essential. Never again must the fundamental right to worship God be trivialized below the ability to buy gasoline. In the year 1831, Alex de Tocqueville, the famous French historian, came to our country at the request of the French government to study our penal institutions. He also made a close study of our political and social institutions. In less than 10 years, de Tocqueville had become world famous as the result of a 4-volume work he had wrote entitled Democracy in America. Here is his own stirring explanation of the greatness of America. I sought for the greatness and genius of America in her commodious harbors and her ample rivers, and it was not there. I looked for it in her fertile fields and her boundless prairies, and it was not there. In her rich mines and her vast world commerce, and it was not there. Not until I went to the churches of America and heard her pulpits aflame with righteousness did I understand the secret of her genius and power. America is great because she is good. And if America ever ceases to be good, America will cease to be great, end quote. In the Book of Mormon, Moroni was a chief captain of all the Nephites in early America. And he said, "And it came to pass, and he rent his coat, and he took a piece thereof, and wrote upon it in memory of our God, our religion and freedom and our peace, our wives and our children, and he fastened it upon the end of a pole. And he fastened on his headplate and his breastplate and his shields, and girded on his armor about his loins. And he took the pole, which he had on the end of his rent coat, and he called it the title of liberty. And he bowed himself to the earth, and he prayed mightily unto his God for the blessings of liberty to rest upon his brethren, so long as there should be a band of Christians to remain and possess the land. And Moroni was a strong and mighty man. He was a man of perfect understanding, yea, a man that did not delight in bloodshed, a man whose soul did joy in the liberty and freedom of his country and his brethren from bondage and slavery. Yea, a man whose heart did swell with great thanksgiving to his God for the many privileges and blessings which he bestowed upon his people. A man who did labor exceedingly for the welfare and safety of his people. Yea, he was a man who was firm in his faith of his Christ, and he had sworn an oath to defend his people, his rights, and his country and his religion, even to the loss of his blood. Yea, verily I say unto you, if all men had been and were ever would be like unto Moroni, behold, the very powers of hell would have been shaken forever. Yea, the devil would never have power over the hearts of the children of men, end quote. I am so grateful for the many Moronis in my life, for their example of faith, love, honor, and courage. We, the people, are responsible for ensuring those who we elect don't blur, bleach, or obfuscate political boundaries in seeking to expand their control. This requires so much more than visiting the ballot box or protesting on the corner of our streets. Those who we elect and entrust in this sacred duty need to stand firm in securing our rights listed in the Constitution, and if not, we are to blame for not insisting so. Samuel Adams said, If ever a time should come when vain and aspiring men or women shall possess the highest seats in government, our country will stand in need of its experienced patriots to prevent its ruin, end quote. I believe my husband, Lavoy, was a true patriot. Today, we must be those experienced patriots, those Captain Moronis, standing for God, for our Constitution, for our freedom, and for our families, for truth and righteousness. We must be the ones to stand. And if not us, then who? My husband wrote a book before he died, Only by Blood and Suffering, Regaining Lost Freedom. It's an amazing book. If you're interested, please stop by and see me. Inside his book, he followed Ezra Taft Benson quite a bit, and he put his favorite quote inside, and it reads, "The fight for freedom is God's fight. When a man stands for freedom, he stands for God. And as long as he stands for freedom, he stands with God. And were he to stand alone, he would still stand with God. And man will be eternally vindicated and rewarded for his stand for freedom." It doesn't matter how it ends. It matters how you stood. And thank you very much for having me.